You came into Mulesoft and finished #1 in your vertical, whereas a lot of people had been in that vertical for a very long time. And even I say, hey, usually stay put. It takes 3, 4, 5 years to like really learn the ropes. So how did you accelerate your success so quickly when you transitioned over to Mulesoft? What did you do to get to #1?
12-week year helped me a ton. It just really helped me be hyper-focused and accountable. Being genuine, detached from the outcome, not focused on the quota, that helps a lot. Then yo-yo selling is probably the most effective, more sales-specific methodology or tool that I use.
I'm thrilled to have Nitin here, who most of you guys know. Nitin's kind of unique in that he came into MuleSoft brand new when he was just starting in the program. And in his first year, he finished #1 out of 20 mid-market AEs for most closed ACV in technology, media, and telecommunications. He was also awarded the new logo champion for closing the most new logos out of 50 account executives in all of the company. And he was recognized amongst the top performing AEs from the CRO of MuleSoft. And all of this earned him a promotion from mid-market to enterprise in just 1 year. And for those of you who don't know, that typically takes at least 3, potentially 5 years to make that jump. Nitin's been one of the best students, I'll say, because he's really applied everything we've learned. He's committed, shown up every week, and he's continuing with this coaching. And today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what he's done to get to this point. Specifically prioritizing bigger deals, practicing stoicism to stay grounded, meditating, exercising regularly, and just having a lot of fun in the process. If anyone knows Nitin, they know he's always happy, always smiling, just bringing the joy every day, which is what we're trying to do here. And I think it's a playbook we can all learn from in a very competitive and stressful world of sales. So let's all welcome Nitin.
Thank you. I'm so grateful and honored to be here. I really thought of what I was going to say while sitting on the toilet this morning. So I'm just going to grab my notes from this morning.
I love it.
Leslie's idea. It goes to the guest bathroom downstairs.
There's a lot of awakenings on toilets that we're talking about today. Not the second person to say. So let's start by learning just a little bit more about you. So you're turning 29 this month, and next month. This was your first full fiscal year at Mulesoft. What were you doing before you got into Mulesoft?
I was at a startup for about 5 years that I co-founded along with 4 others. It was a hiring and career platform, SaaS-based platform, super fun journey, wore a lot of hats. Sales, product, fundraising, operations.
Cool. Why'd you decide to go from a founder or co-founder to going into a SaaS AE role?
Long story short, throughout the journey, again, I wore so many different hats, but I really just started to love sales. In the beginning of the startup, I wore a lot more of a product management type of role. And then as we built our MVP, we started getting customers. And we were fundraising, and I led the fundraising front. And it was right around the early 2020 during the pandemic when we were getting to like mid-late stages of fundraising. I was going on Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park, California, where you pitch to VCs, and I was doing the whole rounds. And then it was announced the black swan of venture capital. Has anyone heard that term before? So pretty much what happened was, because of the pandemic impacts on the venture capital ecosystem, about 80% of investments were cut. And the remaining 20% were primarily focused on pandemic companies like work from home tools, telehealth, or if the founders of the companies were like Elon Musk. I neither was Elon Musk, nor did I have a work from home pandemic-friendly business. I just had a startup and was trying to raise funding. So all those efforts pretty much went down the drain. We didn't receive any VC funding at the time. So the only way for us to keep the lights on was to drive revenue. So it was, if we don't, we got to start letting people go. We will not be able to pay our employees. So I loved that whole journey. It really made me just love sales because I realized converting these free trials to conversions, small business customers, is like not going to help me pay this chief user experience designer and our staff. We need enterprise customers. So we closed 3, Samsung and 2 banks, or Samsung SDS, which is their logistics department, and 2 banks. And then that whole journey just made me love sales. And I realized that I want to get really good at this. And I kept doing that at the startup for about, 2.5 more years. But afterwards, I realized that I wanted to just master sales, and that as a founder, I was going to keep learning how to grow and scale a business. But I didn't think I was going to master sales. And I also thought our sales process was not nearly as complex as selling something like a Mulesoft. So yeah, I eventually made the jump.
I love that. So you kind of took your ego and left it at the door as a founder to say, I want to get great at strategic selling. These skills are going to help me in the future, and leaving to become an account executive is a great way to do that. Did I capture that correctly?
Yep, spot on.
So you didn't have the traditional background, right? Being a founder, wearing a lot of hats. You weren't a full-time seller, yet you came into Mulesoft and finished number 1 in your vertical, whereas a lot of people had been in that vertical for a very long time. And even I say, hey, usually stay put. It takes 3, 4, 5 years to like really learn the ropes. So how did you accelerate your success so quickly when you transitioned over to Mulesoft? What did you do to get to number 1?
I think it was a lot of things. 12-week year helped me a ton. I think that's like the most low-hanging fruit thing that every single person here can do, whether you use 12-week year or another framework that works for you. It just really helped me be hyper-focused and accountable. My first 12-week year was horrible. And then
What'd you score?
It was like consistently 50 to 70%. And then the next one, still not at my 80-85 range that I was aspiring to. But I did really well. I think I sold about 11 times the amount of ACV the second time I did it. And I still use it today. I still use it this week, even though I had a vacation week. I only worked 3 days. I was like, okay, I got to shorten it, but I'm still going to use it every single week. Besides that, I think just a lot of the content we already went over today about being genuine, detached from the outcome, not focused on the quota, that helps a lot. Then yo-yo selling is probably the most effective, more sales-specific methodology or tool that I used. Is everyone here familiar with yo-yo selling? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
just kind of share what that means for anyone listening.
Different people call it different things, but it's like a yo-yo. So you want to try to start at the top or get to the top as soon as you can, get to an executive, and then get the executive sponsor. If, as Jamal Reimer explained last time we were here, get the micro commitments. So you meet an executive, a key stakeholder, and you usually bring an executive to that conversation. Sometimes you might want to send an executive on your behalf to meet that executive. I don't like doing that in the beginning. I want to join and meet that executive and bring executives with me. And we'll usually ask, like, okay, we understand your key priorities as referenced in your 10K, as referenced by the C-suite, as you mentioned before, are clearly around these 4 priorities. You want to increase new logos, you want to expand customers, you want to grow through M&A, and maybe you want to enhance your user experience in these certain other areas. Is that correct? Okay, great. So we understand, based on these several teams that we've briefly spoke to or will speak to and will understand, that we can help solve many of those problems to align with those priorities. Would that be a good use of your time? Yes, no, whatever. So for us to now do that and spend the next 2 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is, can we get some micro commitments from you? And sometimes they're like, what? What are you talking about? Like, what?
Did you say micro commitments?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which Jamal had talked about. And I've used that a lot. It helps me a lot. And I'll usually, the first one I'll ask is something very easy to get them to be a bit relaxed. I hate using anything to do with timeline or transacting for the first micro commitment. I'll usually ask something like, can you get your team to share their data? Or can they show us what's under the hood? Because if we don't understand your exact specifics on how your architecture's set up, etc., we're not going to be able to come up with a tailored solution to be as helpful.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. Okay, so then second is, okay, can we agree to a timeline? It sounds like you want to have this live by Q1 of next year. So that means that we would need to, complete by Q3, Q4. That means we would need to transact by X amount of time. That's your timeline, right? So can we agree to meet you again in 3 to 4 months or whatever it is? I'll bring my executives again. We'll keep you in loop. Yes, no. Can we agree to, there's budget for this project? Yes, this isn't a science project. This is something that you have the ability to fund.
And you're having these conversations with power early on.
Yeah, early on, as early as possible. And then fourth is success criteria, right? And then when we get the success criteria, I then translate it into like, what's the punch list that I can take to my team of what do we need to accomplish to now hit those criteria, hit that criteria and come up with a solution that can be fundable.
So,
and then I just go, as soon as I get that, I treat it like an invisible stamp. And then I just go crazy running around the organization. I try to get in person, as Mike said, carry a badge, not a bag. And I'll just go crazy running around the office, meeting people, unlocking more and more value. And then whenever I get pushed back of like, oh, I don't have time for this. I got to meet next week. I'm like, hey, Ryan, and I never say the CEO or the CFO or, give them a big title. I say their first name. Ryan has explained to us that our collaboration is absolutely essential for us to stay on track for Project 45, whatever he called it. We need to have these 2-3 next meetings over the next 6 weeks. Would you please make a little bit of time for us? Right. And then as soon as you start using their name, they're like, okay, fine, I got to give this crazy 28-year-old some time.
There's so much to dissect here.
Yeah.
But raise your hand if you think Nitin sounds like he's been doing this for 10 years in terms of this approach. Okay. So this is why, again, I wanted to bring him in, right? What was your mindset going into this role as it specifically pertains to, I'll say, learning or growing or trying to be the best you could to learn some of what you really have in just a year accelerated your learning path by, I'd say, 5 to 10 years. And the second thing, which you may have caught on to, is mid-market. So he's selling in a strategic manner while he's in mid-market. So for any bullshit of I can't use this because I'm in mid-market or I can't, take a note. Because strategic selling is not the size of your companies. It's how you approach the customers you have. So I want you to dive into like the mindset going into your first year as it pertained to kind of where you needed to grow and kind of how you thought about, right? Because you're coming from being a founder and then becoming an AE, but your growth mindset has been, I think, your secret sauce. So just talk about kind of where you were at going into the year.
Yeah, I think it's really just like the whole theme of this event is sell like you. Like I had the strength of I could really relate to my customers because I owned a business. I bought software and then I used certain software for mission critical initiatives and then some for some like really low value tasks that we didn't care about because we just wanted to automate time. So I could tell based on the problem I'm solving, did I fall under the top initiative bucket? Or is this just like a really quick and fast transactional cycle that I don't necessarily need to go bother power about? Or is it somewhere in the middle and we're not sure? Okay, let's try to figure out, do we fall higher up or lower so we can determine if this is strategic or transactional?
Yeah, so to reframe what you just said, you came in knowing how to think like an executive so you could weed through and filter the noise and have real conversations with them.
Correct.
Without trying to be needy.
Correct, yeah, exactly.
And that skill of thinking like an executive came from your background and you were using it as a seller.
Yeah.
I love that.
And also because I was focused on fundraising, that was sales pretty much, right? I wasn't selling software, but I was selling our business to investors, and I just saw all the ways they would poke holes, and also they would love to waste your time. So you meet them, they'll do like 2-3 meetings, they'll host you at the office, and then they're just fishing around ideas, and then they'll give you like a polite email, no thank you. So I started to figure out when I was getting lip service and when I was getting buying signs. So I think I had all those instincts, but then I had some of the gaps of just not doing like enterprise SaaS sales for 5-10 years like many others.
Yeah. So you really kind of accelerated when you started doing 12-week year discipline. But I remember early in our coaching days, you said to me, Ian, I can't turn off my brain. I can't stop thinking about work. I can't stop going. Can you kind of describe where you were at and what you did about it?
Yeah, I think coming into Mulesoft, and by the way, Mulesoft is a part of Salesforce for anyone who doesn't know, and just like from a small startup to such a massive organization, a lot of people told me like, oh, it'll be different because of the politics, the red tape, the organizational structure. Like, none of that really was a surprise. Like, I was like, I know what I'm signing up for. But what was a huge surprise was how much I had to manage my time, because there's so much distraction. And it's nothing negative about the company. It's just when you have so many more people and processes and accounts, there's just so much distraction. And I was just getting blown up with Slack messages every day. And I just had to learn, which 12-week year helped me a lot with, was I'm going to create I do about 14 tasks on my weekly scorecard every single week. And usually about 3 of them are not work related. So out of those like 10, 11 tasks, there's probably maybe 4 or 5 that are incredibly strategic. So let me make sure that I do 80% of that scorecard every single week without any excuses.
Can you give us examples of like strategic tasks that you bucket that way?
So prepare with my team to do a dry run of our executive readback to the CFO, right? Then make sure to have one-off meetings with other executives prior to the CFO meeting so that everybody's briefed, right? Those are definitely highly strategic tasks. Or it could be more research related. It could be, study the company's 10K, watch the CEO's podcast, whatever, or listen, not watch. I think those kind of activities. And then definitely I put a huge effort to get on site.
So you had, in the beginning, you talk about a lot of noise. I remember we went through a pipeline review and you had
30.
It was about 30 opportunities. And I said, this is not real. Who can have 30 opportunities? And I said, you need to focus on opportunities that you can win.
Yeah.
What did you do after that conversation? And how did you kind of filter through who was kicking tires versus who was serious? Kind of what happened after that? Because I remember you weren't necessarily accelerating until the second half of the year when we really started honing in on where to focus. Talk through that process.
A lot of it was just, what you helped me categorize was, is this strategic or is it transactional? So instead of figuring out, is the deal happening or not happening, or should I prioritize it by ACV, I kind of got out of all that and just focused more on what problem are we solving and is it mission critical? And if it is, then I'll stay curious. Like if I'm not talking to power, that's okay. It's a pretty mission critical problem. I'll find a way to get to power. Or if I'm talking to power, but I didn't have a super mission critical problem, then I just realized, sounds like a super transactional cycle. Why don't I just get like one call with the CFO, hash this thing out, put a proposal in front of his face. If he doesn't want it, find out why, and just, if it doesn't work, I'll move on to something else. And I think out of those 30 deals, I think I ended up doing 22 transactions for the year, but maybe 4 or 5 of them I had already done. So maybe it was like 17 or so out of those 30. The other 12, I just cut out or pushed.
In terms of like power, was that part of the criteria in terms of whether a deal was serious or not? Like, was that, I know for you, that was a big thing. So
Actually, that was more something that naturally occurred. But I didn't make it a focus. I made the problem the focus.
Okay.
Right.
So what happens if
Yeah.
you know there's a big problem, but you're mid-level and you're not at the right level? What do you do to get higher up where budget can be approved, deals can be accelerated? How did you approach those?
It would vary on each account. I don't think there's a secret recipe, but to really just figure out who cares. Like, okay, if this is such, like in mid-market, the most common problem was, or maybe rather the common goal I saw was, we have 200 to 600 million in revenue and we want to get to $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
That was almost half the mid-market companies. What's preventing you from getting to $1 billion? Sales, we want more new logos, we want to expand. Okay, that's great, but like, well, what's preventing you from accomplishing that now? And then Mulesoft, which is traditionally a very technical, more IT driven sales cycle, I would end up talking to non-IT folks.
Yep.
I would talk to a CFO sometimes, or a chief revenue officer, or a SVP. I even talked to 2 CEOs directly. And we would just learn that, okay, what's preventing you from scaling to $1 billion plus is, yeah, of course you don't have enough sales and customers, but also it's the processes you have in place that you have all these customers, but it's almost as if you've built muscles you wish you didn't have, and that you don't have the process in place to upsell, cross-sell your customers. You don't have a clear view of your customers. You can't tell how they're even using your product.
Mm-hmm.
It's all just in your head, or it's on your CRM.
Mm-hmm.
And a great way to solve that is through integration. To start connecting many of your systems, or to use a product like CPQ and billing that Salesforce happens to sell. I became best friends with the CPQ and billing AE. We would partner together, and I would always I would call it the CPQ billing project. I wouldn't even say integration. Like, you need CPQ and billing in order for you to have a clear view of your customer. By the way, it works really well with integration. Here's Mulesoft. Or the opposite. I'd say you're already getting CPQ and billing. You're already getting this process, these products in place to now transact with your customers at enterprise scale. Although you don't have a clear integration strategy, do you know what risk you're going to face with that integration strategy in place? It doesn't have to be ours, but I'll show you a really good way to get a more clear view of your customers, so that when February hits next year and you want to have hit $1 billion in revenue, you'll be a lot more likely to do so. We also helped another customer do this last month. That would always get me a conversation with an executive.
So having a strong point of view, I think what you're hearing, which I want to just reiterate, is you don't have to sell a product. And what he said is, we want to grow sales, we want to scale, we want to do X, Y, and Z. You don't have to have a product that directly can drive sales, but you need to link what you do as a way to enable them to do what they want to do. So our stuff helps your stuff, integration. So having that point of view to tie your product to their goals, what we call linkage, is something you've mastered so far.
And when I couldn't, I would just ask the customer. Like, Mike's been helping me with the deal I'm working on right now, where we have a very clear understanding of the problems we're solving and the company's initiatives on increasing revenue and growing through mergers and acquisitions, but we haven't been able to connect the dots. So instead of just like lying and saying, oh yeah, if we connect these systems, you're just going to be creating revenue out the door, just ask the customer and say, we understand clearly their product requirements and your initiatives, but we haven't been able to connect the dots, and we want to ensure long-term success of the project. Who else do we need to talk to so that we can start connecting them? The executive just said, this VP of product, this IT guy, this other team, understand revenue a little more, set up meetings. Again, yo-yo, went top from bottom, or mid, not that low.
Where do you get your confidence from? So you're 20, you'll be 28.
29.
You're 28, you'll be 29. Coming in, again, new to the company, new to the products, and you're no problem. Just being so direct in asking. And this whole conference has been about facing your fear, having courage, being authentic. Is that just innate with you? Have you had to like kind of work on that, or does it just come natural because it's just you're a direct person? Where do you get that ability to ask these tough questions and ask for, you know, all the things that you need to do? Like, because that usually takes people a while of not doing it to realize that's what they need to do. If otherwise they're wasting their time. Has that always been something that has come in natural, or did you have to adjust your approach to be able to be more direct and ask the tougher questions?
I think combination of both. I would say I was very naturally confident already, and I also just always remember that having a startup is so much harder. Like,
It's just the perspective, right?
It's just way more difficult, and it's a lot. There's a lot more weight on your shoulders of if you're trying to drive revenue so you can keep the lights on versus to hit like a quarterly quota that you're never gonna remember. So I just
it's all perspective. It's you having gone through that and having that perspective to make, hey, this is easy. Asking someone, right, to connect us with their people.
Yeah.
No worries. Versus I have to fire people and keep the lights on.
Yeah.
My last question before we wrap is, normally the trajectory is like mid-market to commercial to GB to enterprise, and you jumped straight. Just curious, like how you were able to kind of skip the steps, or what was the belief system that you felt like you didn't have to go necessarily, like that you deserved enterprise after a year, you know, crushing it in mid-market. Was that part of the plan all along, or did the job open, or how did that transpire?
So I had made it very clear in the beginning when I had joined, like day zero, that I wanted to take on an enterprise role. And I acted maybe a bit overconfident, that I was like, oh, I could do it now. And, and anyways, a leader, Brian Moore, who you know really well, Ian's friend, who's a
mentor of mine,
a mentor and leader of mine as well at Mulesoft. He encouraged me. He's like, look, just, you know, do mid-market for a year. You'll build the muscles, and then you can see from there. So I just had set in my mind that I'm going to just absolutely crush it, and I only want to do this for 1 year. I don't want to have mid-market accounts next year, but I want to enjoy the journey. So I just made sure that I crushed it. And I kept reminding my leadership every quarter that this is the plan. And then by the end of the year, as we were getting towards the end of the fiscal year, we were having conversations, like there wasn't a role opening and we couldn't quite figure it out. And I was like, no worries, just let me know when you think it makes sense. But I would like to move to an enterprise role for next fiscal year. If there's uncertainty for like until the fiscal year starts, like I'm totally flexible about it, but that's my request. And then I guess the process I didn't expect was, it was like they put my name in a hat. So there was other leaders reaching out, like, do you want to be a manager? Do you want to manage this SMB team? What about this team? What about that team instead? And I just stayed really firm. I was like, nope, I want to move to an enterprise AE role, and I want high-tech accounts. And there was a leader I knew really well. Luckily, a role opened, and it all worked out.
Well, it wasn't luck, because you said there's a leader I knew really well. So you probably, I'm guessing, got to know them while you were at mid-market.
Yeah.
That's a key point. Begin with the end in mind. You knew what you wanted.
Exactly.
You made connections with the right people for the next role, and you sold and acted as if you were in that role already, even while you weren't.
True.
The way you sold and approached mid-market. And then you also were not too proud to take a role that was lower than what you initially thought you deserved.
Correct.
So
a key part also, which I learned, was to not act entitled, that you deserve it. Nobody promised me that I would get a role. I just patient, requested, but made my intentions very clear.
I love it. I think we could all take a page out of Nitin's book. So if you guys, are curious how he does it, again, this is just a small taste, but Nitin lives this value. He lives growth. He lives humility. He lives happiness and joy. He exudes it. You can see it. And for any excuse, right? He transcends those excuses. I'm not old enough. I haven't been selling long enough, right? All of that. And it is that confidence from within. It's that belief in oneself we've been talking about. And I think you really do exemplify that as well as anyone. So let's all give Nitin a round of applause.
Thank you.
We're going to jump right into Tanveer, and then we're going to head out in the front and head towards the boat. So again, you'll have plenty of time to talk to Mike, to talk to Nitin, pick his brain, but this guy's a wealth of knowledge and confidence that I think we all can learn from. So well done, my friend.
Thank you.
Yep, appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me.
Let's